My name is Emily Gilbert. I am the Vice President, President-elect of IACRL, and the chair of the Conference and Continuing Education Committee. Thank you so much to ILA for partnering with us to host this event, and to Cindy for always being here for my many questions. So thank you so much. And also to the Communications and Continuing Education Committee, without whom these events would not be possible. And also to our presenters for sharing their ideas and experiences. We also could not do this event without you. So thank you so much for being here today. I know this sounds like a cliche, but truly now more than ever, I do think we need each other. We are all dealing with things that we never could have prepared for. We did not learn about in library school or elsewhere. So I just think it's really important for us to get together and share our experiences and best practices. And I'm excited to hear from everyone today. So we're going to start with our panelists. So we have two panelists for the theme of adapting physical spaces. So we'll get started with them. And then afterward, we'll do 10 minutes of Q&A specifically for those panelists. So if you have questions, please hold them for the Q&A. Then afterward, we'll do our three panelists for adapting online instruction and services. And then we'll do 10 minutes of Q&A for them as well. And then we're going to close out with an open discussion with the audience. So again, thank you for being here. And I will, we can get started with our first panelist, and that is Liesl Cottrell. So Liesl has been working at Resurrection University for over 9 years, and she has the best library team in the world. I'm sorry if you thought you did. You don't. Liesl does. She told me in her bio. She currently juggles working from home 4 days a week and 1 day on campus, with homeschooling a 4-year-old and encouraging a 6-year-old to hop on a school iPad every day. She rescues pit bulls, raises butterflies, and is one of the rare individuals who enjoys both tea and coffee. Thank you for that lovely bio, Liesl, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. So let me share my screen. Let me know if you have any issues seeing anything. Well, of course, it goes to the not the first slide. Okay, so let's do slideshow and from beginning. Hooray! Everything look good so far?
Looks great. Thank you.
Great. You're welcome. Okay, so holding it together, kind of, maybe. What we're doing during COVID. Oh my gosh. All right, so let me give you some quick facts about Resurrection University. Before I launch in, I just want to warn you, my children are watching a movie, so hopefully they won't be too loud and screaming, etc. So let's dive in. So some facts about Resurrection University. We are currently in Chicago, our main campus. We actually are expanding to Oak Brook as well, but we're currently still in Wicker Park in that neighborhood. We're 107 years old. We are considered an upper division university. And what this means is that we don't have 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds on campus. Our average student is 30 years old. They usually have a bachelor's degree. All of the prereqs for education have been completed before coming to Resurrection University. So they just kind of launch into their big core courses for nursing or for radiography as well. So we have over 1,000 students, undergraduate and graduate programs as well. That's 100% commuter too. We don't have to deal with dorms or anything. And then we are actually located in a hospital, which makes our environment very interesting, especially when COVID hit. Yikes. Okay, so our library team, there is myself, and then there is our lovely Erin too. We are the full-time librarians. And then we have Carrie and Zach as well. They are phenomenal, even though their titles are evening assistants. They do everything that Erin and I do. And unfortunately, we don't have any more student workers. I know this is quite common with a lot of universities at this time. Hopefully, when the after times occur, we'll get more student workers. Our virtual hours are reduced as compared to the pre-pandemic hours, but we're still available 6 days a week. And our biggest issue when COVID happened and just everything was, it was really weird. The fact that we have no return book slot turned out to be our biggest problem when it came to COVID. So when COVID struck, from March 13th to August 17th, there were absolutely no book returns and no checkouts at all. I know that this is probably a very common timeline for the majority of us. But our campus, AKA the hospital, became a COVID testing center. And we actually had COVID cases within the hospital too, which means that no one was allowed on campus until August. And even when August hit, all of us were just kind of in a panic mode because we didn't know what to expect. So our library size, it's like a big box. There's not very much circulation with air. We have no windows. We have 3 doors, and we were told not to open any of them. So obviously our students could not use the physical space safely when it came to COVID. So when the fall semester hit though, all of the clinical locations for our students were still shut down. So the majority of our students used what's called SimLab or simulation lab. It was on the other side of the hospital than where the library was. So while library staff members were going in, no students were allowed on our wing of the hospital. And so we were just like, okay, we have hundreds of materials that need to come back. Students aren't even allowed to drop off anything by us. We made these lovely library return bins, of which we would wheel to a completely different part of the hospital, which was called Entrance 6. And this is where a department named Student Life was managing all of the students within the sim lab and being checked in and their temperature and going through the gamut of all of the lovely COVID questions. And we were a little concerned about theft of the materials that were coming back because these bins were actually put outside of the hospital due to, we just weren't sure about contamination. So we were worried that, someone just walking by the hospital would take something. Thankfully, it didn't happen. But then when Student Life was not on campus, they would take the return bins away and lock it in a stored closet area that only security from the hospital could open up. So, and we did start the holds for students, but we actually delivered the holds to Student Life and then they would pass it on to the student because students weren't even allowed to bring book bags into the hospital. They were allowed nothing. So the only time that students could pick up a book from the library is if they were leaving their sim lab. So it was kind of a hot mess. We were barely holding it together because we were subject to the schedule of the sim lab, which changed often. We were subject to the schedules of Student Life Department, which literally changed weekly, and they never let us know it. It was very stressful for us. Holds were barely happening because when a student would request a material, it was something that's been checked out for months and hasn't been returned yet. It was very, very frustrating. And it was also confusing for the library team because we would have to travel to the opposite end of the hospital building to see if even one item was picked up. So you could tell we were barely holding it together. Haha. So what we did is we asked for help. Hospital security came to our rescue. So they allowed us to move our library bins from this one very far location to behind their desk at the main entrance, which is where the library staff was allowed to enter. So hospital security said, we will see how your students do. If they are not compliant with any of our requirements, we're going to shut the whole thing down. So I had to relay the message to students, make sure you wear your mask, socially distance, have your ID, and make sure you pass that temperature check. Otherwise, you're not allowed to even return your book. So the faster we got our returns, the more holds we were able to process, which was good. but the library was still not open for students. So that was still another problem that we had. So we asked for help again, and we're like, hey, hospital security, let's try one more thing. And the only reason they let us do this is because the students were still compliant with everything. And of course, we were really, really nice to hospital security. So they allowed us to start putting carts outside of the library. So as you can see from this lovely picture, all of the holds that students would ask for, we would put on a cart, and we would leave the cart. And the cart would be available for students to pick up at any time. And the students loved this. This means they didn't have to schedule a pickup time or a day. That means that the library staff didn't have to move our schedules. We could actually have a set day where we could go in, and we didn't care if the students would come by or not. It would be nice if they knocked on the window, but we would say, stay away, nice to see you. So it was just fantastic. We had a huge influx of holds and pickup times. And as of yesterday, we still have not a single theft. And which is great though, because the library is closed to visitors. But something I did not mention in here is that there is now a COVID vaccine clinic right outside of the library, which is open to only AMITA patients at this time, but it can be up to 400, 500 people a day going through this hallway. So we're kind of on edge. We're a little worried with a ton of people going by, but you know what? Our big takeaway is that we would rather have a potential loss of materials in order to increase accessibility for our students. And I'm willing to do that for our students. At this time, the library is still only open to staff members, but our holds doubled as in even in February. And the big thing that I've noticed now that we've hit 2021 is that students really are trusting us to pull materials for them. They'll say, hey, I just want this book. And we'll say, this book might be out, or you might have to be on the reserve list, but we have a lot of other materials that could work for you. And students are really starting to appreciate and take that service into account. And I mean, the one thing that we just have that a lot of academic libraries don't have is that 24-hour security presence. It just gives us a little bit more breathing room and has helped us adapt to our space. So thank you so much for your time and for your attention. Let me stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? There we go. Okay, there you go. So I don't know if there's anything else I need to say, Emily.
No, you're good. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Great.
All right. Yeah, please hold any questions for Liesl until the Q&A. And then next we're going to hear from Caitlin Stewart. So Caitlin is the Teaching and Learning Librarian at Illinois State University. And in this role, she is responsible for the Milner Library's Teaching Materials Center and acts as the subject liaison for the School of Teaching and Learning and Illinois State University's laboratory schools. She earned her Master of Library and Information Science at the University of Washington while working at, I hope I'm saying this right, Suzalo and Allen Library. Thank you so much for being here, Caitlin, and take it away.
Yeah, hi everyone. Let me get my screen shared and set up so that we're good to go. All right, hopefully once it finishes loading, you should all still be seeing my slides.
Looks good.
Excellent. So thank you for that introduction, Emily. As was stated, I'm Caitlin Stewart. I'm here today from Illinois State University, specifically Milner Library, and my presentation is going to be focusing on a collection within Milner Library known as the Teaching Materials Center. For some context, the Teaching Materials Center is a collection of pre-kindergarten through 12th grade materials that is meant to support our educators, our future educators at Illinois State University. It's located on the 6th floor of our library, and it's organized and set up so that it mimics school libraries, such that when our students engage with our collection, they go to future schools with libraries. Hopefully their experience with the Teaching Materials Center translates to how they can utilize that space or those resources. The TMC collection includes easy books, which are fiction picture books, as well as older fiction, nonfiction, elementary, middle grade, and high school textbooks, professional teaching materials that give activity ideas, as well as non-book materials such as teaching aids or manipulatives to use in the classroom. So this space has been working with a number of new circumstances, not all of which were a result of COVID-19. The first is that I'm a new teaching and learning librarian to this university. I actually started in July. So for my students and faculty, that was a change. Another change, of course, like many of our Carly family, we switched to Alma Primo as our integrated library system. That meant when folks came in on the fall semester, most were unfamiliar with how to search for materials within this new system. And of course, these two normal changes were then exacerbated by our circumstances that we are facing with COVID-19. So we had many students and faculty who were working, studying, or living remotely. We opened or closed to walk-in patrons based on the COVID-19 case numbers in our area and also public health guidance. Curbside pickup was implemented, and my instruction sections, as well as for other subject or other librarians, were offered online through synchronous or asynchronous means. But this isn't really giving a picture of some of the concerns or questions or what my students and faculty and other users were grappling with. And I was hearing three main things when fall semester started. The first was that my users often want to browse the materials in the Teaching Material Center when selecting resources. And this makes a lot of sense because they're very visual, tactile resources. And a lot of students, especially returning users, were used to just going to a specific section of the TMC with relevant materials in person, and they didn't really know how to translate or reproduce that searching behavior with our catalog. They were used to just walking up to the picture book section and finding something that looked fun and didn't know how to replicate that online. Also, our new users were totally unfamiliar with what materials are available in the TMC, what the TMC is, how to access them, and many have still never been in the library because of the circumstances we're in. I started by showing you this slide describing the Teaching Materials Center, and it quickly became apparent to me that this type of introduction, be it on a LibGuide or in a synchronous class session, wasn't doing enough to meet those three needs. Something else had to happen. There was something missing. And what was missing and what could be improved was a sense of place and space. That slide is missing connecting authentically the physical library to our virtual presence. And I worked with our instruction and student engagement committee to create what we dubbed the TMC virtual tour. And the tour was predominantly created by Allison Rand, one of our instructional design librarians, and myself, but we also had help from two other librarians, Chris Warland and Lindsay Skaggs. So major credit to both of them. And I'd like to just show you what it looks like and walk you through what this virtual tour actually means. So our virtual tour lives on the Teaching and Learning LibGuide. I'm sure this looks like a very familiar, differently branded format to many of you. I actually just recently created this short video introduction to the TMC virtual tour because my faculty members said that they wanted this page to be a standalone asynchronous material on their ReggieNet sites, which is our learning management system. But the TMC virtual tour itself is created using a product known as ThingLink. And ThingLink lets you make interactive images that allow buttons or clicking on an image that you upload. So we took the floor plan of the Teaching Material Center on the 6th floor and added icons so that students could click through how to use this tour, learn about the TMC, and then also kind of walk through the stacks of our collection to learn what materials were in each of these sections. It gives a description of what types of materials are in the section and also how they're organized. The second part is incredibly important specifically for my collection for virtual browsing because our different sections within the Teaching Material Center are organized in different ways based on people's preferred browsing behavior. So our easy books and our fiction books are organized by author so that you have your books by the same series or by the same author in the same location. But nonfiction switches to subject so that all of our biographies on Harriet Tubman are on the shelf together so that people don't have to walk between different things. So it can be a little confusing for students because there's not a hard and fast rule when they're learning online. So the way that this is a useful resource to those new users that aren't familiar with the Teaching Material Center is that they can just take the tour and learn what's here, how it's organized. And I also have a key on the right-hand side because the numbers sometimes make it a little bit difficult to know exactly what you're clicking on. We also created a plain text version for accessibility purposes just to make sure that everyone could engage with this material as well. But it also has functionality that goes beyond just learning what materials are there. And how we did this is through clicking on a specific section, we linked it to an advanced catalog search in our catalog that focuses on that. So I'm currently looking at the TMC fiction section. I clicked the link, and it will take me to a search in our catalog that is showing 6,704 books, but they're all books that live on these 5 shelves of the library. So I can tell students that they've essentially walked to the fiction stacks of our library when they click that button, if they're hoping to browse. Then, as I think many of us are aware, you could just scroll down this kind of randomly sorted list of results, or a student can click into a title, pull up that record, and then go to the virtual browse feature inside of Alma Primo and just page through cover by cover all of the materials that live next to that material on the shelf. And this was really great for students when we were not open to walk-in patrons, where they could kind of hop into the section that they were interested in and truly just look through covers. But, as librarians, we love students browsing, but I think I'm always hoping to push people, as it's appropriate, to do some more sophisticated search behavior or learn more about how the catalog works and other types of searches. So I can demonstrate this with a different section. For example, if someone went into our textbooks link and saw the textbooks in the catalog for Milner Library, they would, again, just like fiction, see all of our textbooks here. And we're getting 1,700 results. But this is where, in the actual physical space of our collection, our textbooks are organized into elementary, middle school, high school, and then subdivided within each of those sections into subject areas. And I tell students, it's inefficient to scroll through all of these results here looking for an elementary math textbook. So what you can do is mimic that eyeline searching using the advanced search box. So if you, when you're browsing in person, walk first to the elementary section to look for materials there, you can just type in elementary or primary in our search box, and it effectively does the same thing as heading to that location. Then once you're in that elementary section and you want to focus in on mathematics to find books in that context, you can add that phrase in as well to focus in even further. And if you search, it's essentially like you're looking at the elementary math textbooks on our shelf, which is really helpful for users. I did have to, for other materials, such as the fiction materials here, say that if you're going to throw in terminology like friendship or Spanish language material, sometimes that's going to break because you're break the browsing feature for you, because you're going to be looking at items that are not next to each other on the shelf. And that's totally fine. That just means you're going to switch from using the virtual browse feature to scrolling through your actual results list. So the TMC virtual tour is effectively a way that we have been trying to merge our physical and virtual presences such that users can really understand how our online presence merges with the physical organization of our space, so that whether or not they're in person or virtual, they can learn about the other realm in that way. And that's it for me. I think we're at our Q&A now, Emily.
Yes, thank you so much. That was so interesting. Thank you. If anyone has questions for Liesl and Caitlin, now's the time. We'll take until 10:34 if we have enough questions. So you're welcome to write them in the chat box. You're welcome to unmute yourself, whatever you'd like. I can get us started with the virtual tour that you did, Caitlin. Did you find that students preferred using virtual browse to like the results thing, or did they really resonate with that particularly?
I think virtual browse is really helpful for when their like information need or searching behavior aligns with how materials are organized on the shelf. So
Sure.
if someone's looking specifically for a certain author, for fiction and nonfiction, that works really well. For fiction, easy books. For nonfiction, I think it works perhaps the strongest for using the browse, because if someone's looking for a nonfiction book about water quality, they just have to find one, and then they can use a virtual browse to look at all of the books on that topic next to each other on the shelf. But that's why we're trying to give options and kind of break down that there's only one way to search type of idea by using the tour to kind of get you halfway into an advanced search for a certain material and then empower you to think critically about where to go from there based on what you're searching for.
How did you promote this new amazing feature to your students?
It's mostly been to faculty members thus far. So I went to a faculty meeting and basically gave everyone a presentation on this resource, which is I had an opportunity for feedback from faculty members about what would you want to see here that would be helpful for your students, or what would work well, and kind of email blasted it. But a lot of the time it's a couple faculty members get it in the class. Although I am hoping fall 2022 or our next new school year. No, I'm totally off. Fall 2021. I'm getting a year ahead of myself. Our next school year, I think, is when we'll see a lot more introduction, when we have that new batch of students and all of them kind of get an introduction to the library through that lens.
You could tell me that the next school year was fall 2022 or fall 1999. I have no idea anymore. John Oliver called what we're living through a time soup, and that really resonated with me. Does anyone else have questions before we move on?
I have a question for Liesl. Did the changes in access for students also change your relationship with security? You had said that they were very accommodating and able to adapt. Do you see any long-term impacts from that?
Well, weirdly enough, we've had some very fun situations with security being at the hospital for years, whether that was a theft issue, what was it, fire extinguisher explosion issue. Recently, we had a waterfall in the library too. So they are very knowledgeable about who we are. But they're also, I think if we hadn't had that foundation of a good relationship with them and communication, they would not have allowed students to come in. I really think if it just weren't for us being nice and actually viewing security as human beings who are also just as tired as us, that I don't think it would have worked. But I think it definitely has helped our relationship too. And I think because of this little experience, that the security don't look at the students as, oh gosh, here comes the students. I think they're now seeing them, oh, okay, they can actually be responsible too, as opposed to, someone coming in with sweats and they're exhausted and their hair is mussed up and everything, which is how they see students. But they actually, I think it's really improved the relationship with security and students as well. And we've definitely seen a huge increase in the staff of security at the hospital too. So we've gotten to know more people, and it's been actually a really great experience in such a weird situation.
In case you guys caught that about a fire extinguisher exploding in Liesl's library, One of the first times I met her was at HSLI, and we were both giving lightning talks, and I had to follow Liesel's lightning talk about a fire extinguisher exploding in her library. Nothing I said sounded interesting after
We've
that.
had so many weird things happen. It's like we're just in this, I don't know what it is. It's a black hole of chaos where the library is. It's just awful. But yes, it was a wonderful meeting with Emily, and I felt a little sad. I was like, oh boy, because a lot of people were very interested in that, because that's a once in a lifetime, hopefully, experience.
Hopefully, yeah. Liesel, we have another question for you in chat from Dan Matthews. Thank
Oh,
you,
great.
Dan. He asked, how did you track that students had picked up their holds?
Yes, so this definitely does put a little bit more work on the library team. It's a good old email. And if the students don't respond to that email, because what we do is when a staff member comes to the library, we'll take a picture of, how many materials are still out on the carts. And so we open up our lovely spreadsheet that we're all sharing, and we figure out, which are the books that are missing from that picture. And then we reach out to those students, just hey, just confirming that you picked up your material, please let us know. And I think we've only had 2 students who have not responded, and I'm quite comfortable with a few of our systems that allow us to pull up, personal information about the students. So I will actually call them and just to confirm, because we just want to make sure that there is no theft issue going on. But yeah, it's just generic email and possibly a phone call to confirm their holds. So it is a little bit more work for us, but it's totally worth it.
And it's temporary, so more work for now, but not forever. Well, thank you so much. Does anyone else have questions?
I have a question actually for Liesel, and that's how did you communicate when these different strategies changed? How did you make sure that all of your users were up to date on what you were doing?
Oh, it was so frustrating. So it wasn't just, I wish like a simple email would be great. But there was definitely issues where a student would say, hey, I'm here to pick something up, or I'm here to drop it off, and I have no idea where the heck to go. So of course we would update signs on the library doors where students really couldn't access. But since they were able to access that entrance 6 area, we definitely did put up how to get a hold of the library if you have any questions, and of course via emails too. But something that we implemented maybe about a year before COVID hit was a texting system, which students have loved now. So when they get to campus, I would say 90% of the time, if they have a question about where to find something and they're physically on campus, they'll just text us immediately, because who wants to call? But yeah, no, it's been a variety of methods, whether it was a mass email announcement, lots of pictures. I've noticed, especially since COVID started, if you don't send pictures in email, students don't even care. That's weird, but that's okay. We're visual people now. But yeah, so it was just a variety of methods, but also letting, the student life team know that we were moving things, and then informing security too, because no one in security really knew where things were going. They just, knew don't touch anything. And that's all they wanted to do. They didn't want to have any part of it, just, leave it alone. But yeah, there were a few hiccups, but it wasn't too bad.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much to everyone for your questions. And with that, we'll go ahead and thank you to Liesel and Caitlin for your wonderful presentations. We really appreciate it. Those were very interesting. So let's go ahead and move into our second half here. Looking for my spreadsheet. There we go. Okay. So next up, we have William Condon. So William is an assistant professor and the instruction and reference librarian at Prairie State College. He's been there since 2016 in that position. Or I'm sorry, 2019. I'm dyslexic, apparently. I just found out. Previously, he was a research librarian at the Daytona Beach campus of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. That sounds very interesting. I'd love to hear more about that later. His research interests include information literacy instruction for new majority and first generation community college students. Thanks so much for being here, William, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just sharing. Okay, so hi everybody, my name is Bill Condon, and as Emily said, I am the Instruction and Reference Librarian at Prairie State College Library. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how our whole small and scrappy library worked together to adapt our instruction and services and move them online. So I'll give you a really brief introduction to the college and our library, brief timeline, how we prioritized and planned our work, and then how we executed that plan, and how we are currently doing an assessment and some numbers that we found from last semester, and then if we have any questions. So Prairie State College is a community college that is located in Chicago Heights, Illinois, and we boast that we are the most socioeconomically diverse district of community colleges in Illinois. So we have students from all backgrounds, and so it's a really fun student diverse population. Right now we're at about 2,800 FTE, but that number is a year old, so I'm sure we've lost some students since then. Our library is, at the start of the pandemic, we had 16 employees, including our part-time employees and students. Now, due to reduction in force and some early retirement offers, we're down to 8 employees. And like I said, we're lean, scrappy. We are working all together to make the library run. So last year, March 9 to 13th, we were actually on spring break during that time. And I think the 11th, the college sent out an email to the whole campus community saying that spring break was going to be lengthened for a week and then extended for a week, and then to give the professors chance to move all their courses online. We have online courses at the college. We have a few online degrees, but it's very much a in-person traditional face-to-face class college, which presented some challenges, which I'll talk about. And then March 23rd, all classes went virtual, and we have been virtual except for our nursing and some of our technical courses since then. We are virtual in the fall and this semester, and looking like it's going to be that in the summer, maybe moving back into the fall. We're not sure yet. So the first thing that we wanted to do was plan our priorities. What did we need to do right away to ensure access and ensure that our students and our faculty and staff all were getting what they needed from the library? Our first priority, of course, was the health and safety of our library employees and patrons. And this wasn't really well, it was a concern, but our campus was closed right away. But as the months went by, employees were allowed back, and we ended up doing 2 different pods of people. So people worked 2 weeks on campus, and then they were home for 2 weeks working from home. The next priority was communicating to our community. Not only that we were still there, available for anything that they needed, but they had access to our collection. We wanted to ensure quality instruction and ensure that continued access. So as I said, our campus was immediately closed, and it's been somewhat open since the summer. Our adjunct librarians, we have 3 adjunct librarians and 3 full-time faculty librarians, took it upon themselves, and they went through all of our LibGuides and took out all of our print books that we recommended and added only ebooks or other digital material. Luckily, we had started about 1.5 years ago, completely revising and rewriting all of our LibGuides. So a lot of them were up to date, and it wasn't too tedious of a project for them, but they did a really great job. We put a halt on buying anything in the print and moved toward buying more and more ebooks. Then we also identified and planned to fill any gaps in our learning objects. So where are the places where students get stuck navigating the website or going through the college, and we decided to make learning objects to help them get around. And then we also had a really big push on a social media and email campaign to inform our users, our students and our faculty and staff, hey, this is what you can do in the library, this is what we can't do, but here's how we can help. We really focused a lot on communication at all different levels, from our dean to our staff. So as I mentioned, we halted our print collection and increased purchasing ebooks. We halted ILL for print, but still offered it for anything digital, basically. The biggest or the most impactful thing that we did, the most impactful step that we took, was streamlining our account setup for our students. Prior to this, it was a pretty cumbersome process where students had to come into the library and they had to fill out some paperwork, and we had to fill out paperwork, and it was it was a fairly long process, and it was kind of annoying. And we had actually started looking at ways to streamline this before, but the pandemic really put a crunch on that, and we were able to do that. And now we see our usage numbers increasing quite a bit. Reference, we added chat boxes to all pages of the website. As I mentioned at the beginning, our classes are mostly face-to-face traditional. Even those classes that were online or degrees that were online, our students like to come in person to ask us questions. So chat and email, although we've had that for years, it wasn't always the most used services that we had. They like coming to the reference desk or making appointments with us and meeting with us then. So we talked a lot about this, and we looked at some other models. So we instituted a proactive chat this past December, and we have seen our numbers just increase because we wanted to invite our students to ask us questions. Hey, we're here to help. We know this is kind of confusing time. Let us help you. We really focused on our social media email campaigns. We started a newsletter for our faculty and staff, and we really focused on talking about our virtual visits. We use Google Meet at Prairie State, so we had a lot of those with students. And then at the beginning of fall semester, our first year experience director at the college was worried that students wouldn't have anywhere to go to ask those FYE type questions. So we worked with them and got one of our chat queues aligned onto the college homepage, and we started fielding those questions that came in. We figured this was just an extension of our normal duties. We answer all of those types of questions anyways, mostly directional or how to do certain things in the college. We're pretty familiar with all that, so it was pretty easy to answer those questions. Instruction-wise, we really focused on asynchronous and just-in-time instruction. At the beginning of working at home in virtual school, all the classes were asynchronous. And the summer and fall, we moved to some synchronous classes, but for the most part, they're still asynchronous. So we wanted a lot of just-in-time instruction. So video tutorials and other learning objects, we went through and figured out where we needed what, and then we would just record them and throw them up there. Not really worrying too much about editing too much. We can go back and make them look prettier later. We just wanted to get them up to get the help out there. We really focused on community education at the beginning. We are at a community college, so we put together some resources on the virus itself last March and April and May. There's so many rumors going on about the virus and so much mis and malinformation about it. So we put together some resources about the coronavirus and how to stay safe. And then we also put together some resources to help our working parents and students entertain and educate their kids that are at home. So those two LibGuides are our most viewed guides of last year, were the coronavirus and then fun things to do while it's stuck at home or something silly like that, we named it. Got a lot of use out of those and a lot of really positive feedback from all members of our campus community. And then the biggest thing that we've done with instruction is that the faculty librarians became embedded in course shells for direct immediate instruction, via either if it's synchronous or discussions or tailor-made videos for those classes. So in the late fall, we started assessing everything we were doing and planning moving forward. How could we get better? We found that we had about a 25% decrease in the number of, we use EDS, of searches. Some of that could be contributed to lack of instruction classes, those COM 101s, those English 101s that come to the classroom and run, they all running the same searches. We saw a 4% decline in e-resources accessed, which was a lot less than what we thought. But as I mentioned before, we had a huge increases in our ebooks accessed, especially in Overdrive. Anything available in Overdrive, I'm getting emails all the time about people requesting books in Overdrive. And our collection management librarian, Thane Montana, has done just an incredible job keeping up with the demand. As I mentioned, our proactive chat has increased our reference interactions. I only have a few months of data, but it's double, triple the amount of time. We're in a assessment project right now, assessing how that's going with our students, how they like it. We really pushed our virtual visits via Google Meet, as I mentioned, and even some faculty required a visit with a librarian. So there are some weeks where we were all busy meeting with students, but that was a lot more fun, seeing faces and seeing how students were doing and talking to them. So that's been really fun, one-on-one instruction with students. And then all the faculty librarians are embedded in multiple course shells, where we used to be just liaisons and embedded into our composition 2 class, the research writing class. Now we're getting more into adult basic education, communications, and other classes. So our faculty has really taken a look at what we've done and liked what we're doing. And so they've invited us more and more into their classrooms. So that's about it. If you have any questions, there's my email address and our library website. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Excellent. Okay, let's go to, again, keep your questions for the Q&A. I already have some, I'm excited. So the next up we have Hillary Ostermiller. Hillary is the Instruction and Online Learning Librarian at Columbia College Chicago. And Hillary has previously worked as a media studies librarian, a business librarian, a terms specialist, a book editor, a first-year writing instructor, a tutor, a bookseller, and a public library clerk. She has lived in Michigan, Boston, Chicago, and Virginia, and just returned to Chicago again this past summer. She does not knit or have cats, but she's super glad if you do. I love that. Thanks, Hillary. All right, take it away.
Thank you so much. Okay, let me share my screen. And we are going to start the presentation. So I'm going to talk specifically about adapting our online instruction. As you heard, I'm Hillary Ostermiller, Columbia College Chicago. And when I was talking to my colleagues at the Columbia Library about what they thought I should say about how we've adapted to online instruction during these times, one of the things that they said is, well, we have an instruction and online learning librarian now, and that's good. So that's new and helpful. Like Caitlin said earlier, I started my position in July during a pandemic, not necessarily recommended moving states during a pandemic, but worked out okay. One of the benefits for me for that has been I joined this institution without any preconceived notions of what instruction should look like or does look like here at Columbia. So when we were planning specifically for fall, again, I wasn't here during the transition in the spring, but planning for fall, we kind of built together a toolkit of 4 different aspects of instruction and how instruction can come in these different formats. And we kind of attack it as a mix and match. So we incorporate Zoom class visits synchronously. We do interactive virtual activities. We have more targeted research guides that are incorporated into instruction. And we have a significantly expanded repository of video tutorials. And we put these together in different combos based on the learning outcomes for the specific course that we're working with. So we've really marketed this as to faculty as we can tailor instruction for you and what you need. You don't need to come up with some idea of this is what I think the librarian should do with this class. Just tell us what you want students to know and we'll put it together. So I'm showing you some snippets here on this page of what some of these activities might look like. And one of the things we discovered is that some of the things we've been able to do virtually actually work better in a synchronous Zoom visit than they would have in person. So one of the common activities that we can do is a beginning of class and end of class check-in. And we tend to do those using Google Forms. Very easy, very low barrier for students. You just plop a link into the chat and then students can go and answer a couple questions in a very familiar looking interface. And that's actually easier when you're in a virtual space, either synchronously or asynchronously, than when you're in person and trying, even if you want it to be something that's anonymous, and these check-ins being anonymous has been really, really important for the students. Easier than in person when you're trying to tell people how to, oh, you either need pencil and paper, and then we need to find pencil and paper, or go to this website. Okay, we all need to make sure that we're going to the right URL. Linking, dropping a link in a chat, very, very easy. And like I said, these check-ins, we get so much good information from them. So in this kind of top left graphic here, you can see that a common early question might be, have you chosen a topic yet? This is where the anonymity is so, so helpful, because students are much likely to say, oh, actually, I don't know my topic yet, but I was never going to tell my professor that. I was never, and the professor might not know that, but it definitely would shape the context of the instruction I'm about to give in that class. Same thing with the end of class check-ins. So you can see great data about how they feel, what they're going to do next. And I tend to wrap up end of class check-ins with, your usual questions about what questions do you still have, what's a new thing you learned, but also something super wide open, just anything else you want me to know. And then you get some great quotes, usually, that again, you probably weren't going to hear in person. Like, I had to include this one. This was from earlier this week. I swear I did not pay a student to say this. I promise that without prompting, a student said, "You make me actually want to do my work." Amazing. And no one was ever going to say that in person, ever. No one's going to come up and say that. So that's really great. Like I said, it also offers us so much flexibility about how we can piece these things together. So it might be a live Zoom class visit after students have watched a series of videos and done some activities. So then the live visit can be something where you're really addressing specific questions. Or it could be all asynchronous, where they're watching some videos, doing activities, all tied to a research guide, or the research guide might be used in the class. So it really offers us so much flexibility. And then obviously you get to include memes when appropriate. So that's fun too. I mentioned a vastly increased repository of video tutorials. This is just a little snippet of what we created. These are videos that are about research tips and strategies, but also specific databases. We worked really hard to make sure that they were user-friendly, in the sense that they're short videos. They're usually about 3 or 4 minutes at most, and they all have closed captioning. We do the subtitles for all of them too, so that they're very accessible. These are things that we really wanted to make sure to carry through no matter what instruction looks like in the fall. So we did this huge push this past fall in our relatively small team. There were 3 of us working on it at the time during the fall semester, while we were also doing, our jobs and everything else. We created 54 new videos. So that was a lot. We want to make sure these carry through because they're so useful no matter what instruction is going to look like. So even if we're all, back in person and doing those live class visits face to face, no matter how a class is going, so things might be going great in the class, everyone's smiling and nodding and following along, and it all makes sense, and they get some live practice and great. What is still going to happen is 2 weeks later, when the students are actually doing the research for the thing that's due the next day, they are maybe not going to remember all of the clicks that made sense 2 weeks before and which link to go to for which thing. So having the videos for the students to be able to go back to and return to is valuable no matter what. So to make sure we're carrying this through, one of the other changes we made is, as you can kind of see in the second picture on this screen, we've included a video icon link next to our specific databases that have videos about them. You can see if you mouse over it, you get that little pop-up there that says video tutorials available. And that's available either from our A to Z databases list or from specific research guides. And then when you click on the icon, it takes you directly to either a video that we've made, or in this case, a playlist. So if they want to know more about how to do specific things in ArtStore, they click on that icon and are taken to our playlist in YouTube. So that's one way we're trying to keep things going. And obviously, this is not surprising. Usage has hugely increased of the videos. We did have video tutorials before, but obviously we have a lot more of them now, and we're pushing them more now. So very, very nice drastic infographic to show how comparing fall 2019 to fall 2020. But it's not just the videos that have increased. We also had increased views in our research guides as well. So we had a robust selection of research guides. The research guides were already being used a lot. You can see that the numbers here are we're in the thousands per month already anyway. But as you can see, over the course of the fall, more people were discovering these as options and ways to connect with the library. So that also ties to this idea of people discovering things that we already were doing, but gaining a new appreciation for it. So that's something we also heard from faculty as well. Some of the faculty feedback we got was things like, oh, I didn't realize you could do this. I didn't realize this was a thing you could do for us. We didn't know. I think the impulse is strong for both students and faculty to think of the library as a building that has books. And by all of us being forced to divorce the idea of a library from just one building and from one particular material type, even if we have a lot of things that have always been there, we've gotten more people aware of it and excited about it. And a lot of the things that we built to be used asynchronously, faculty have said they're gonna keep using no matter what. It doesn't matter what instruction looks like. This is something they didn't know they could do, and now they want to keep doing it. So this also isn't just improved relationships or expanded relationships with potential with faculty, but with other units on campus as well. So we've built new and stronger relationships, in particular at a higher level, not just a one-on-one personal level, with our faculty development office, and then also our academic technology team that administers Canvas, our learning management system. So those are also relationships we want to keep going, again, no matter what instruction looks like. I included some of this feedback because, again, I couldn't make some of this stuff up, like that first sentence there. I really love it, where the student said, the presentation was amazing. It was informative, coherent, helpful, and even fun. And if someone is saying that you are both coherent and fun, I don't know a better compliment than that. So that's pretty great. So those are some of the things we have done to adapt our online instruction, and we've learned a lot and are excited to kind of bring this idea of flexibility about what instruction can look like into, again, no matter what campus looks like next year.
Thank you so much. I love reading student feedback quotes like that. They're like instant serotonin. And it is now my goal to be even fun, like surprise fun. I'm going to sneak it in there. Thank you so much. That was lovely. All right, and closing out our section on adapting online instruction and services, we have Joshua Avery. Joshua is the group leader for the teaching and outreach group at Buswell Memorial Library at Wheaton College. And his interests as a researcher include issues of assessment, outreach, information literacy, open access, and religion and information. Thank you so much, Joshua. You are still muted, FYI. Here we go.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Avery, and I'm the group leader for the Teaching and Outreach group at Buswell Library at Wheaton College. So a little bit of context about Wheaton is 100% of undergraduates study on campus, and most undergraduates live in campus housing. We have around 3,000 students and are primarily undergraduate and residential. So it was a huge disruption to how we had done instruction and some of those library services when the pandemic struck. We are currently back on campus with students experiencing in-person instruction, and almost everyone on campus is being tested weekly. This was not the case, of course, for most of 2020, so I want to share those experiences with you. My group, the Teaching and Outreach group, is responsible for making sure the library fulfills its assessment, teaching, and research mission. In short, this group of folks is responsible for making sure that users know what the library offers and how to take advantage of that. So, like many of you, when our institution opted to go fully remote, we only had a few days to shift from a completely in-person experience, serving a nearly completely in-person student body, to serving a now 100% remote student body, while many of us also worked remotely. Some of us were allowed limited access to our buildings and offices, but only while fulfilling our educational mission. So we moved from providing only a limited virtual research assistance presence through chat, phone, and email, with most of our assistance coming either in-person appointments between students and librarians or in-person visits to our research help desk. We moved from that to a 100% virtual research assistance operation. So some of the key tools that we used to accomplish that were continuing to use LibAnswers for chat reference. So we also use a chat reference. I know some other folks have made mention of that. Continuing to use email and using LibCal so that students could continue to book appointments, and then using Google Meet to meet virtually with students for in-depth research assistance. In the middle of the pandemic, campus IT stopped sort of supporting Google, so they wanted us to transition to Microsoft Teams. We've been able to do that. That solution has been fairly well received by students, and post-pandemic, we plan to resume offering in-person research consultations while continuing to give students the option of meeting virtually if they wish. LibCal allows for Microsoft Teams and Zoom integration. So once students select whether they want an in-person or virtual appointment, it will generate a URL that will allow you and the student to meet together. And then, of course, we continued to provide chat and email research assistance and saw a huge increase in patron usage of those mediums. Additionally, we created a unique COVID URL for our library to help us communicate updates, and we strongly ramped up our use of social media to inform our users that we were continuing to provide research assistance and also letting them know other changes that we were providing in our services. And then we used targeted emails to faculty to let them know what we were providing their students. We even virtually celebrated the English poet William Wordsworth's 250th birthday by sharing a day-long virtual celebration of his poetry. We posted short video clips of students and faculty reflecting on his work, and hopefully that provided a bright spot for folks during the pandemic time. The vast majority, again, of our library instruction had been in class, And of course, we were forced to move fully online. So the tools that were most important here, we continued to use LibWizard to provide both just-in-time instruction and also to provide more in-depth structured tutorials around specific assignments. These are things that we would typically have provided in one-shot in-class sessions. We did that through LibWizard. We had just recently moved from Guide on the Side to the LibWizard tutorial suite, so we were scrambling to sort of move our tutorials over from Guide on the Side to LibWizard. And the pandemic provided a little bit of an extra boost for us to hurry up in that process. So we're also providing customized instructional tutorials, example for specific database features, even virtual tours of particular spaces, and other types of education using iMovie and then hosting those on our YouTube channel. Large portions of our 4-year information literacy curriculum is delivered in a tutorial that we manage through Microsoft Storyline. And so delivering that in a virtual way just continued. The college was really happy with that particular tutorial, so they asked the librarian responsible for that to create a college-wide COVID-19 protocol tutorial that was required of all students. This was a terrific opportunity for us to sneak in a little bit of library information, so we did that. And then, of course, we've been going into classrooms through Zoom and Microsoft Teams. We also are continuing to rely on LibGuides. We also created some special new LibGuides to support this new landscape. One of those was a guide created by one of our librarians that provides up-to-date e-resource offerings. And that LibGuide took off and got over 10,000 views in just a few days. So we were really happy with the response to that. So we've been listening to faculty and student feedback and have been creating more tutorials to meet faculty demand. And of course, doing those things virtually has become a huge part of our year. So here are the results in terms of how folks have responded. We didn't experience a large overall decrease between 2019 and 2020 in research assistance queries. We did, however, experience a shift in how folks reached out for help. So I think Bill mentioned at Prairie State, there was an uptick in students using things like email. We saw that as well. So you can see there, the blue bar is from 2019 and the orange bar is from 2020. And you can of course see a drastic shift from in-person demand to chat and email demand. We weren't able to help students over the phone. The way our phone system worked is it would have to have been directly connected to only one librarian's personal cell phone. And for good reason, that librarian did not want every research assistance call directed to their phone for 24 hours a day. So we didn't experience a huge decline in demand for appointments because we were able to continue meeting with students virtually in lieu of the in-person instruction and in-person appointments they would have typically been experiencing. So that's basically what I have to share for what we're doing at Wheaton.
Thank you so much. And we can go into questions for the last 3 presenters now. I realized we can have more than 10 minutes, considering we had 10 minutes for 2 and there are 3 of you. So we can do more than 10 minutes if people have a lot of questions. I will start. My question is for William. When you talked about faculty requiring students to do the meetings with librarians, I did that once too, and that lasted 1 quarter, and then I had to nix it because it was too much for me as one person. Then again, it was we kind of have students meet with their programmatic librarian. So was it like students could meet with any librarian? Did it become overwhelming? I'm just curious.
Sure, great question. Actually, it didn't become too overwhelming. We would just tell each other, hey, I have these days blocked off for students, so I might not get done, or I might not be able to work on these other projects. So it took a lot of communication, and also we played around a lot with the wiggle room in between the meetings. They're mostly set up as 15-minute meetings. Sometimes they went longer, so sometimes we would have students waiting. So that was actually the biggest concern that we had was, making students wait. It wasn't too overwhelming. There were a week or two where we were all incredibly busy, but we had really positive feedback from both the faculty and students. So we continue to offer that as a service this semester as well.
Excellent, thank you. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be happy to read them off, or if you would like to unmute, you're welcome to. While we're waiting for more questions to come in, Hillary, I was so excited about the video link or the video icon next to the databases link.
Yeah.
So is there like a special thing you had to do that, or how did that work?
No, it's really easy in SpringShare. I'm going over to my SpringShare right now just so I can make sure that I'm telling you the exact right name of things.
We have the databases list in SpringShare as well. So I'm just like, is there a thing in there I never noticed? That's so cool.
So yeah, so if you're in any given database and I can share my screen again so everyone can see what I'm doing. Let me do that. Yay, let's all look at my SpringShare.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can see here if you're in the specific asset. So this can either be a database asset or any asset, and you have the options here on the left to assign resource icons or assign thumbnail images. I actually did a big project at the winter break, which is not a break, of doing both of these things. So if you assign a resource icon, you can create an icon in here, and then when you're in the actual A to Z databases list, this is the database iteration, so you're not going to be able to edit it here, but you can assign an icon to go to a specific URL. So that means that it doesn't always have to go to the same URL every time you use it. So for example, this one would go to one place, but you can still use that icon and have it go to a different URL. We also have the option to assign thumbnail images. So we also did that with Columbia College Chicago is an arts and media and communication school. So they are very, very, very visual students. So it was a good add-on for us to have logos assigned to all the different websites and databases as well, so that students can at a glance identify like the art store logo and be like, oh yeah, that thing, that's the picture that I'm looking for. So yeah, it's actually, it's not hard. It's right in there. And like I said, it so neatly just brings our stuff together so that we don't have to figure out, okay, we made all these videos, how do we get people to those links? We put them together with the resources right at the point of need.
I mean, that makes sense. And now I'm wondering why we don't do that at Rasmussen. That's brilliant. I'm going to be bringing that to my team. Thank you. Yeah. We have a question in the chat from Sharon. I think it's more like, I'd kind of like to hear from everyone on that though. So I think Sharon, we're going to save that for the open discussion. What other questions do we have for our panelists though, before we start the open discussion?
I have a question for Hillary. This is Sarah. I think you said that you had 4 tools that you used. You used Zoom, class visits, targeted research guide, and video tutorials. Am I missing one? Or
so the Zoom class visits, the interactive virtual activities,
okay,
the integrated research guides, and then the video tutorials.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we really do. I mean, we really do kind of think of it as just like a bag of tricks that we use in different combinations. So we use every combination of those 4 things. I was never a math major, but if you do the exponential combination of all those 4 things, that's how many different options we've used.
Nice. Okay, thank you.
Actually, I have a question for Joshua. So when you were talking about with your when you were using LibCal and then Google what was it, Google Meet, to meet with students. And then I think you said you moved to Microsoft Teams.
Yes.
I was curious if there was any barrier to students using Microsoft Teams. I've never actually used that outside of a professional setting. So like, did students have trouble using that? Is it browser based, or do they have to download an app or a program or anything? I was just curious.
Yeah, we were really worried about that too. So Google Meet was really easy for them because all of our students, their email address is actually hosted by Google Apps for Education. So when we moved to Microsoft Teams, we were concerned, but it is browser based. So they receive a URL, they click on that, and it just opens up a window in the browser that they're in, and then they can interact that way. So I've used it quite a few times, and I've talked to my team about it, and I haven't heard of any students having those kinds of technological issues. It probably helped that we made the switch halfway through, well, we're still in the pandemic, but sort of halfway through that time, because students by that point were already sort of working out issues and using Zoom and all those sorts of things. That's my guess.
That's good to know. Thank you. Yeah, we use Teams like as internal instant messaging here at Rasmussen, but I have never used it just for like personal purposes or anything. So I was curious. Thank you. We use WebEx for research assistance appointments at Rasmussen, and honestly, that's probably not that much easier. It's certainly not like the ease of using Google Meet, but it's also what faculty use to deliver lectures. So
Okay.
I think they're already exposed to it at that point. All right, I'm keeping an eye on the chat for any other questions. Or of course, like I said, you're welcome to unmute if you have any questions. Oh, I just saw Rebecca put in the chat, Teams is browser and app-based. Okay, just like other Office apps. Yeah, because I have the app on my computer, so that's why I was curious. Sorry, the thing just scrolled up. You said, the only issue we had at our institution with Teams is when we try to do polls and virtual workshops, and students had to be signed in to answer polls, and most didn't sign in. Okay, that's interesting. I feel like polling has never worked for me in virtual workshops in any service I'm using. All right, any other questions for this group of panelists? Okay, well, if not, we can move into the discussion section. So this is our last portion of the event today, and we would like to invite all of you to just kind of participate in an informal discussion on your own COVID-19 practices and adaptations you've had to make. And we aren't recording this, so if you want to tell us that your boss did a really bad job, I mean, maybe check the participant list to make sure they're not here, but you can if you want to. So I'm going to start with